Welcome to Shaq's house. Shaq's house. That's our Shaq. You're now in Shaq's house. Shaq's house. Shaq. Welcome to Shaq's house.
What's up, Shaq Housers? How you doing? It's your boy, Shaq House. Yes! Hope your week went well. Mine's been going all right. I saw that movie, The Blackening, on last Sunday, right? And it was not what I expected. It's supposed to be a parody of like black tropes and black culture and black tropes in horror films, but it should have been funnier and should have been scarier. And the only takeaway that I have from that movie is this, that all black people, including myself, it's a moral imperative that we all should know how to play spades. Yeah. Anyway, what we got today is this. We got when power mimics collide. That's right. Gideon versus the Mimic. I've always wanted to do something on these two characters because their powers are similar yet so different at the same time. How they function on Krakoa and what they can really do given the examples that they've shown on panel. Don't know what I'm talking about? Check it out.
The Mimic. The Mimic is a mutant who manifested his superhuman powers through a chemical accident. As a result, he now has the power to rearrange his own physical and genetic structure so as to endow himself with the same intellectual, psionic, or physical abilities of anyone within a 1-mile radius of him. His power operates by a constant emission of invisible psionic waves into his environment that perform a full-spectrum genetic scan on anyone within his power's broadcasting radius. His power then transmits back information that his mind and body then incorporate. His power is also partly psychomimetic, meaning that he draws upon the factual knowledge of others. For example, he could become just as smart as his teachers in high school or adopt purely physical skills, immediately becoming the strongest and most skilled football player on the field. His power also comes with a mechanism that allows him to instinctively master the abilities that he copies. But chiefly, of course, is his ability to duplicate the superhuman powers of others, be they physical, psionic, or energy-based. The Mimic retains all of these traits for as long as the person or persons remain within his scanning radius, with his Mimic talents quickly fading once he gets out of range of his template or templates. Originally, his power was not subject to his control and could activate whether he desired it to or not. The Mimic's powers have changed over the years, however. After having mimicked all the powers of the original X-Men during his brief tenure with the team, he later attempted to copy the artificially duplicated powers of the Super Adaptoid. But instead, the resultant power backlash erased the Mimic's duplicated powers and temporarily disabled his base power as well. When his mimicking ability returned, it began to grow out of control. Somehow, he began siphoning energy from people within his radius, making them grow weaker and weaker to the point of death, and that radius was expanding by miles and still growing. So to prevent himself from becoming an unwilling mass murderer, the Mimic threw himself on the Hulk and absorbed enough gamma radiation to apparently kill him. But instead of dying, the Mimic's power locked onto Wolverine, who was a few miles away, and it mutated him into an exact copy of Wolverine, with both his powers and appearance. Eventually, though, he cleansed himself of Logan's template and tried to re-establish control over his own power. The Mimic's power is even capable of duplicating features based on abnormal physiology, such as the Angel's wings or the Beast's oversized appendages, and he can hold multiple abilities at once. And through long-term exposure combined with certain power enhancements, he has permanently retained the powers of the original X-Men, Professor X, Cyclops, the Beast, Angel, Iceman, and the Marvel Girl. Some fun facts. He was deputy leader in the days of the original X-Men, but he never really fit in during his brief tenure with the team. The Mimic's status as a mutant has changed over the years as well. Initially, during his first appearance, he was a non-mutant whose powers came from a chemical accident in his father's lab. However, Marvel Comics Presents issue number 59 suggested that he was actually a latent mutant whose abilities were triggered by the accident. And in Dark X-Men in the Beginning number 1, further testing supposedly confirmed that he was not a mutant, only mimicking mutant abilities. However, he has been resurrected on Krakoa and serves as a backup for the Resurrection 5, which in effect has retconned him back into being a mutant. Yeah, Calvin Rankin, the Mimic, he is the OG of power mimics. Without him, there'd be no Hope Summers, there'd be no Sync, and there damn sure wouldn't be no Peter Petrelli. Gideon. Gideon has the mutant power to restructure his own genetic code so as to equalize himself against any opponent he faces. When dealing with biologically superhuman opponents, however, this ability naturally manifests itself as power mimicry. Gideon also has an extremely long lifespan due to his status as an external. Now, externals are mutants who, in addition to having powers from their active X genes, are also gifted with near immortality on top of that. An external's immortality manifests at the point of their first mortal death. You see, they would age normally until their first death, then after which they would be self-resurrected and remain frozen at that age indefinitely from then on. An external is supposed to be capable of recovering from just about any injury given time. However, they prove to be just as susceptible to the legacy virus as other mutants, and they could also be killed by fellow externals as well. Externals, they can sense each other's presence through a minor telepathic link and detect when a new external has ascended or even if one is killed. They could also summon a congregation of externals, teleporting into each other's presence even over great distances. Some fun facts about Gideon. He's a green-haired Spaniard who was on one of the 3 ships that Columbus commanded in order to explore the New World. He died during that voyage, but returned to life upon the ship's arrival to the land that later became America. It's unknown, however, when exactly he discovered his own mutant powers or met any of the other externals, but he amassed a sizable fortune and developed a corporation by the 20th century, manipulating people and events for his own ends. Given that he's been the same age since the 1400s, however, he must have had plastic surgery or make use of life model decoys when dealing with the public. Aged life model decoys, that is. He was presented as a family friend to Sunspot during his first appearance, but killed Bobby's father in a long-term attempt to manipulate him. You see, Gideon thought that Sunspot was going to be the next external who was going to be part of their group. However, that turned out to be Cannonball. And the externals, they were similar to the Immortals in the Highlander series, though characters like Selene, Apocalypse, and Cannonball, they predate the concept. And Gideon was later killed by Selene in the X-Force issues of the 90s, but later returned to life via a convoluted series of events and is now on Krakoa, just like the Mimic. Okay, here's a little compare and contrast on both Gideon and the Mimic. Both mutants, they predate fellow replicators Hope Summers, who merely copies and manipulates powers remotely, and Sync, who could initially actively feel and manipulate his own aura and could initially synchronize it with other mutants, allowing him to duplicate their powers or even replicate their powers in his aura, but he can now duplicate and keep all forms of superhuman powers. But here's some differences. The Mimic, he puts a psionic scan on living beings around him, which allows him to alter his genes in order to give himself the same physical and mental abilities, whether superhuman or not, as those of the people around him. He replicates their capabilities so long as he's within a 1-mile radius of his template. But long-term exposure combined with certain power enhancements have allowed him to permanently retain the powers of the 5 original X-Men. He has their powers at the level that he first mimicked them at, including Xavier's telepathy, if not genes. He should potentially be able to develop them all to the same degree that they did, including Iceman and Jean Grey's Omega-level potential, but has not demonstrated any proficiency to do so yet. Now, the Mimic's Earth 12 variant, the more popular Exiles Mimic, he has the same ability but with more control. He doesn't have to mimic any templates that he doesn't choose to. However, this variant of the Mimic can only manifest 50% of the power levels of anybody that he copies. And also, he can only adopt 5 different templates at any given time. This means 5 different sources, not 5 different powers. For example, Wolverine, his claws, his senses, his healing ability, and other animal characteristics, all that counts as one template. The Exiles Mimic also has the option of permanently adapting a set of powers if he stays in someone's presence for about a half hour to 60 minutes. If he does, the Mimic retains those powers until he chooses to drop them or exchange them for another set. Now, his limit still remains 5 templates, though, no matter what the combination of temporary or permanent sets. And like his counterpart in the main reality, he began with the powers of the original X-Men, but swapped powers so many times that he died with the power templates of Cyclops, Colossus, Wolverine, Northstar, and Deadpool. Also, to clarify, Gideon does not mimic powers. That's just the most common manifestation of his ability, sort of like how Lifeguard has the power to adapt whatever traits necessary to save lives in any situation, but typically ended up transforming into a super strong golden humanoid. You see, Gideon's power, it has more of an evolutionary basis, which makes it structurally similar to characters like Lifeguard or Darwin than to absorbers or copycats like Rogue or the Mimic. Strictly speaking, Gideon had the power to match any opponent he faces in order to level the playing field between them. When dealing with biologically superhuman opponents, this naturally manifests itself as power mimicry. His power could also equalize himself against unliving opponents as well. In his first appearance, he was seen fighting battle droids in a training exercise, and he defeated them all after replicating their mechanically enhanced strength, computer-assisted reflexes, and metallic durability. An actual power mimic couldn't do that, because robots and droids, they don't have any genes or bioenergy signatures to copy from. And like the Mimic, Gideon is capable of duplicating physical mutations and manifesting multiple powers from different sources all at once, such as when he used the powers of the entire New Warriors roster. He was able to wield Speedball's kinetic field in ways that Speedball could not, but whether this was some intuitive part of his mutant power or merely an example of Gideon being far more intelligent and imaginative than Speedball is unclear. His power can also equalize him against unliving opponents as well. During that same issue, he fought Dwayne Taylor, the New Warriors leader known as Night Thrasher. Yet Night Thrasher removed his hydraulically enhanced battlesuit before advancing on Gideon after Gideon indicated that he could match the abilities of the armor as well. However, in that instance, Gideon was severely beaten as he had grown too used to copying the powers of others around him and using them against him. So Night Thrasher, possessing no superhuman powers, solely relied on combat training to beat Gideon. Because he only made a few appearances using his power, the full extent of Gideon's abilities has never been shown. However, based on these anecdotes, it appears that Gideon could fire repulsor rays if he fought Iron Man, matched Deathlock's reinforced adamantium cyborg frame, the electromagnetic capabilities of Guardian's armor, etc., etc. Now, both mutants, Gideon and the Mimic, their abilities are very similar, but not the same. The Mimic, his power works by mentally scanning the genetic code of people within a specified radius of him. Gideon's power does the same, but scans atomic structures of living and unliving matter, and if it interprets either as some kind of an invitation for competition or a challenge, it gives him their exact same traits. If he stood toe-to-toe with the Mimic, he'd win. Not just because of the Mimic's history of mental and power instability, but because Gideon's power is rooted in trait evolution. He adapts to his environment and people, and must have some intuitive capacity to use it properly to keep him from flying off the handle. Let him be a backup for the Resurrection 5. I mean, look at it right here. It already proved to be too much for the Mimic, and Gideon, he's got centuries of experience and patience. Okay, Shackhousers, that's what I got for you this week. Tune in next week. I'm going to tell you what I'm doing right now. A rundown on Monica Rambeau and all her powers. That's right, Monica Rambeau. So tune in then. I'll see you next week. Later.
Mansion, apartment.
Shack, house. Yes!
Yeah.